scrutiny panel could have invited all sides to have their input and could have made serious and sensible recommendations as to the way forward. What we have now is a totally unacceptable way forward and one which will not work, quite frankly. But can I also say that there are a couple of questions that Avon Wildlife Trust must be asked and must answer in this. In 2010, they concluded an agreement with Persimmon Homes to take over the nature reserve. It's a legal agreement. I have a copy of that agreement. It was never signed.
That's true.
I do not know why they did not sign that agreement, although as a board member of PMML, along with my colleagues, we continue to ask why that agreement had not been signed. By all parties.
Why did he ask Avon Wildlife Trust?
Avon Wildlife Trust and Port Marine Management Ltd. The second question for AWT is that during the course of the discussions on this, the trustees and officers attended a meeting with officers at North Somerset Council, at which they were told that they would have no further involvement in the management of the nature reserve. Now, bearing in mind that their agreement had been drawn up with Persimmon Homes and not North Somerset Council, I do not know why, and I think I'd be interested to know why they did not then take the matter up with Persimmon Homes, because I believe, having spoken to Persimmon Homes' current managing director, I believe in good faith, he is telling me that had they done so, they would have been encouraged to continue the management for another year while these matters were resolved. I would also like to just explain this question of this pot of money which is around, and just explain how that arises, because Port Marine Management Ltd is established purely to raise the level of funding which is needed to meet the annual budget of, at that time, Avon Wildlife Trust, and of course on top of that the cost of administering that, and the cost of administration was an issue. Let's be quite clear about that. But the requirement was purely to raise that level. Prior to Mr. Ashton, Mr. Giles and myself becoming members of the board, the levy had been set by the current directors, who were all appointed by the development companies. And they had set the level at an arbitrary sum which had, in fact, allowed a significant reserve to accrue. There was no justification, or is no justification, for that reserve. But can I just split the money a little bit here at this time? Included annually in Avon Wildlife Trust budget was a sum to be set aside for replacement of capital works within the reserve. And that was a fund which they was budgeted for, not actually handed over to them until they made a bid for that money from PMML, but that is known as the sinking fund, and it forms about 100k of the money we're talking about. The other sum, the 300k, has accrued because the levy charge was set at too high a level. And the advice given to us at the time we had a meeting with the residents in 2014, was that that fund had to be held in trust for the residents, and therefore the only way we could deal with that fund was to set an ongoing levy charge annually to to reduce that fund so it came down to a reasonable level. And that was the intention. We had set a charge for 3 years at £54, which would have progressively seen that reserve reducing. Now, the reason this fund is important is because it is not and never has been portrayed as an asset of Port Marine Management Ltd or of Persimmon Homes. It is held in trust, and the advice we had is it did not have to be recorded in any of the accounts, the annual returns made by Port Marine Management Ltd, and was certainly not included in Persimmon Homes' annual returns. And therefore there is some serious doubt about this sum of money which officers of North Somerset Council have been merrily going around saying how we've got all this money that will last us for 3 years, for 10 years or 15 years, whichever you want to say. There is a serious question mark over the validity and legality of that fund being handed over to North Somerset Council. The only legitimate way that I can see that that fund could be handed to a third party is if there was a community trust established to take over the reserve, and that fund was committed to them to manage the reserve, employ a part-time warden, which I believe would then encourage perhaps volunteer wardens as well, and we would bring this reserve back into local management where it actually should be. Because let's be quite clear about this, whatever is being said, North Somerset Council and their contractors Glendale are landscape gardeners, wildlife gardeners, basically. Now that's not a derogatory comment, because it means to say that where they are looking after amenity land, they take into account wildlife interests. But they are not managers of reserve. They do not have the expertise to manage a nature reserve of national importance. And therefore it is my belief that the only legitimate way forward for this reserve is the establishment of a community trust. What I would like to see, Madam Chairman, is a small body of people, responsible people, coming forward and saying they were prepared to establish that trust, to ask North Somerset Council if they would consider that, and if they would, then this council offer to assist those people in establishing that trust, because I believe that is the only sensible way forward now for